been reminded that that sometimes we have to man up and we have to deal with some crucial, critical issues that a lot of times the church neglects to deal with. A lot of times the church becomes silent when it comes to certain topics. And I've come to realize that our silence simply says that we don't have the answers. But my brothers and my sisters, I challenge you on today that even in not having the answers, even in not necessarily knowing, I challenge you on today to do all that you can in order to get the answers that you need.
Amen.
I challenge you on today, my brothers and my sisters, as the church, don't be afraid to stand up and deal with certain issues that constantly plague not just our communities, but even each and every one of us individually. And so on today, I want to take that opportunity and I want to deal with one of those issues.
All right.
That sometimes we find ourselves struggling with and being silent about. Turn with me very quickly, if you don't mind, to 1 Samuel chapter number 30. 1 Samuel chapter number 30. First Samuel chapter number 30 at verse number 6. First Samuel chapter number 30 at verse number 6.
Mm-hmm.
You will find words that read similar to this pen. David was in great danger, for the people spoke of stoning him, because all the people were bitter in spirit for their sons and daughters. But David strengthened himself. The King James Version says, but David encouraged himself in the Lord his God. That's enough right there. That's enough right there. That's enough right there. But David strengthened himself in the Lord his God. David encouraged himself in the Lord his God. My brothers and my sisters, for the time that is allotted to us to share on today, I simply want to talk from the idea of I've got to get past this.
All right now. All right.
I've got to get past this. I know it goes without saying, my brothers and my sisters, this year of 2020 has been a whirlwind of a year for us.
Oh, yeah.
We've had to suffer with and endure so many things that each and every one of us can say that we were not prepared to have to deal with. We've had to sit back and watch quietly as we have so many turbulences that have taken place, not just here in Georgia, on this East Coast, in this country, but worldwide. My brothers and my sisters, we've even had to deal with some things that we weren't necessarily prepared to deal with.
Right.
Even myself, brothers and sisters, after being called as the pastor of this illustrious church, the Macedonia Baptist Church Incorporated, and having been extended the privilege to come and to serve her as her under shepherd, prior to even getting my footing real good, we had this global pandemic that shook up everything. And caused us to have to disperse.
Right.
And in the midst of being dispersed, we have had to lay to rest so many members of Macedonia, names like Deacon William Grimes that come to mind, names like Sister Christine Bell, Deacon J.B. Jones, Sister Joyce Jackson, and countless other individuals that are connected and united with the church. We've had to call their names on the roll and lay them to rest.
That's right.
And let's not forget, we are living in America. And white supremacy is still running crazy.
Yeah.
And we have to call the names of Ahmaud Arbery. We have to call the name of Breonna Taylor, who still has not had justice. We have to call the name of George Floyd. We have to call the name of Jacob Blake.
Yeah. That's right.
So many named and unnamed individuals. We have to call their name.
Yeah.
We even have to deal with the recent passing of Chadwick Boseman,
Yeah.
whose portrayal of Jackie Robinson in 42, Thurgood Marshall and Marshall James Brown in Get On Up was beyond stellar.
Yeah.
Let us not forget how he captivated us and inspired so many of us and made us believe that we had the greatest king that Wakanda has ever seen. And for so many of us, he will continue to be our King T'Challa.
Yeah.
Then there's this continued battle with the global pandemic that has claimed and stripped away so many lives.
So many lives.
Constantly, daily, we turn on the news and we read various articles about the number of individuals that COVID-19 has stripped away from us.
Yeah.
We won't be able to see the potential of those individuals.
Yeah.
We won't be able to see them live up to and having lived up to being all that they could be. We won't have the opportunity
That's right.
of experiencing their contribution to us here on this earth. Because this pandemic is running crazy. It's enough to drive you crazy, to cause you to lose your mind. For so many of us, my brothers and my sisters, if we are truly honest with ourselves, grief is setting in.
Yeah.
As we continuously see lives taken before they have been well lived, grief is setting in. As we see our loved ones stripped away from us, grief is setting in. Individuals are dying at the highest rate that many of our generations have ever seen.
Mm-hmm.
And it's almost as if no one cares. Not only do we have to fight against white supremacy, but then we have police officers that shoot first and ask questions later, or seek to cover up what they know when they know that they've done what was wrong. But then we have our leaders who would rather make $1 now and see countless people fall prey to COVID-19.
Yeah.
It's enough to drive you crazy.
Yeah.
It's enough
No.
to make you lose your mind. When you're stuck at home because your job has laid you off, and even right now the government won't come together on a stimulus package to help us in our time of need, it's enough
It's enough. It's enough.
to drive you crazy. It's enough to make you lose
Your mind.
your mind. I know I'm not the only one. I know that I'm talking to somebody out there in virtual land. You yourself, you're having to deal with this grief issue. And it's time for the church to stop sweeping stuff up under the rug
That's why.
and start dealing with issues that people are actually truly facing and having to deal with.
That's right.
Let me give you very quickly, the 5 stages of grief, In 1969, a psychiatrist named Elizabeth Kubler-Ross wrote in her book on death and dying that grief could be divided into 5 stages. Her theory became known as the Kubler-Ross model. The first stage is the stage of denial. The first stage, my brothers and my sisters, is the stage of denial. This is when you pretend the loss or change isn't necessarily happening. In that denying, it may give you the time that you need to gradually absorb the news and begin to process it, but it causes you to live in a fictional place. My brothers and my sisters, so many of us, we've experienced denying something. As a matter of fact, each and every one of us, we've had some tragedy to occur in our lives, and rather than accept the fact that the tragedy has occurred, we step back away from the situation and we say, oh no, that didn't really happen. Number two, after denial, number 2, there is anger. Let the whole church say anger.
Anger.
So many of us begin to mask our true feelings in attempting to cope. However, the emotional pains that one feels is reflected as anger towards sometimes towards individuals, and at other times towards inanimate objects. Your rational brain knows the objects of your anger isn't to blame, but your feeling at that moment is simply to lash out in anger. And that problem with anger, my brothers and my sisters, when we're in that stage, is that the problem is that we end up making the situation worse than what it actually is. Oh, my brothers and my sisters. My brothers and my sisters,
All
let's
right
be
now.
honest with ourselves. Let's be honest with ourselves today. When we find ourselves in this stage of anger and we begin to lash out, instead of now just having that one tragedy that occurred in our lives, we have gone and caused so much other corruption that now that even turns into tragedy. So instead of just having one cross to bear, now we have gathered together 3 and 4 and 10 and 30 and 100 crosses that we have to end up bearing.
Yeah.
Because we lashed out
Yeah.
in anger.
In anger.
Let me give you number 3. Let me give you number 3 very quickly. Let the whole church say bargaining.
Bargaining.
One may find him or herself creating a lot of what if questions.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Or if only statements. This stage, my brothers and my sisters, usually occur when you have these moments of intense emotions that make you feel vulnerable and helpless.
My Lord.
When you find yourself in that place where you say to yourself, if only I had done. What if I had made a right instead of making a left?
Right.
This stage of bargaining is a deterrent that helps you postpone the sadness, the confusion, and the hurt you may feel.
Right.
A lot of times, my brothers and sisters, sadly but true, this is one of the stages that we like to even use in the church.
All right.
Because each and every one of us, we are just quick to say to God, well, God, if you only.
Yeah.
God, if you do this for me, then I promise you I won't do that. And then we turn right around and go right back to the mess that we did.
Do it again.
The bargaining stage. After the bargaining stage, Kubler-Ross, she says that then there is the depression stage.
Oh yeah.
Ooh.
Oh yeah.
My brothers and my sisters, this stage can get very, very difficult and messy.
Yeah.
It can feel overwhelming. As a matter of fact, we've already talked about depression once before in a sermon just some weeks ago. We talked about depression and how when one is depressed, they will find themselves either overeating or undereating. They will find themselves losing sleep. They will find themselves always in a sad and somber state. They will find themselves seemingly, whereas just like a boxer in a ring where one has the advantage and all of a sudden they sneak a punch in and it just knocks that person back and causes them to try to get grips. Depression has a way of seemingly knocking the life out of you.
Yeah. That's the truth.
To the place where you just can't seem to get nothing right.
Have mercy.
To the place to where you would rather be locked up in a dark house with all the blinds closed and all the lights out. To a place where you just sit around moping and groaning.
My Lord.
The depressive state, the depression state.
Yeah.
But then number 5, and I like this, my brothers and my sisters, I like this. Number 5 says that even though I'm experiencing grief, even though I'm experiencing some form of tragedy, I like this, accepted it.
Okay. Yep.
Acceptance can only come when you allow yourself to wrap yourself around what it is that has actually truly happened, and then you say that no matter what has happened, I believe I'm going to be all right, and I accept the fact
Right.
that this has happened. Later on in time, my brothers and my sisters, I know that we're talking about the five stages of grief, but later on in time, there were two more stages that were added. The first one that's interjected in order to make it 7 stages of grief. The first one is pain and guilt. Pain and guilt occurs when you feel the loss is unbearable, and that you're making other people's lives harder because of your feelings and your own needs.
All right now.
Oh, my brothers and my sisters, have you ever found yourself in a place where you were dealing with something and it was so heavy on you, and before you knew it, you were around some other people, and other people's personality began to alter and to change. People's facial expressions began to change and alter because of the fact your grief was so heavy that they even themselves started to internalize your grief.
Oh, my. Preach, Reverend.
But then there's this final 7th one. There's this one, the upward turn. The upward turn. This stage is when you've been able to move past many other stages, and you're left in a more calm and relaxed state. This stage is when you're able to sit back and look at everything and say to yourself, I'm not going to worry.
All right.
I'm not going to fret.
Not gonna fret.
I'm just going to sit back. I'm going to relax. And I'm going to watch how this whole thing works out.
Right.
I don't know who you are today, and I don't know where you are. I don't know where you are in life, but somewhere along life's highway, you found yourself having to deal with these stages of grief.
Oh, yeah.
And let me encourage you, my brothers and my sisters, let me encourage you, please, as your pastor, as your friend, as your mentor, as your whoever I am to you, let me encourage you simply by saying, if by chance you are finding yourself in one of these places and you can't seem to get out of it, don't be afraid to go and get the help that you need. You might be dealing with the passing of a loved one, and you don't know how to get past that thing. Sometimes you've got to go and sit on somebody's couch and talk that thing through. I want to encourage you. Seek the help that you need in order to make you a better you. Well, McCall, how does this thing tie into 1 Samuel chapter 30? How does this thing tie into 1 Samuel chapter 30? Well, let's be assured, my brothers and my sisters, that tension is rising. Tension is rising. You already know because you've been to Sunday school class, you've been in church long enough, you already know that by 1 Samuel chapter 30, you've already had to go through 29 other chapters. And it is constantly talked about this tension between David and Saul. You know David, the truly God's appointed king, but Saul, the people's appointed king. You know that the tensions have been raising for long enough. You know, because you've been in church and you've been in Sunday school. You know that Saul desires to have David's head on a platter. You know. And by chapter number 27, David finds himself fleeing to the Philistine land in order to escape Saul. And then look at what happens, my brothers and my sisters. If you go back to chapter number 27, you will find that David and his 600 men decided to raid the Amalekites' land, leaving behind nobody. And then having the audacity, tenacity, and mitigated gall to take all of their flocks, their herd, and all of their clothing. And David truly believes now that he's riding high. David believes now, that he's in the good graces of the Philistines. As a matter of fact, because David has raided all of these territories, he now finds himself in a place to where the Philistines are wrapping their arms around him. Wrapping their arms around the 600 men. But then things began to change as the leaders, as the army leaders within the Philistine army, they decided that they didn't want to have any more dealings with David nor his 600 men. And so as they were preparing to attack Israel, as they were preparing to attack the people, because now Saul is dead, they don't have a king sitting on the throne. As they are preparing to attack, one comes to David and says, no, the people don't want you with us no more.
My Lord.
So go on and turn back and go back to Ziklag. Oh, my brothers and my sisters. And then the story truly gets bad as we enter into chapter 30, because once David and his 600 warriors, once David and his 600 soldiers return to Ziklag, they find that they've now been raided.
Right.
How do you deal with life when you have raided somebody or something, and then that somebody or something turns right back around and does the same thing to you?
Have mercy, have mercy, have mercy.
Oh, my brothers and my sisters, watch this thing closely, because as David and his 600 men arrive back at Ziklag, here's what happens. All of their wives, all of their sons, all of their daughters are now gone.
My Lord.
I want you to get this. I want you to understand this. David raided the Amalekites' land and killed everyone. But the Amalekites turned right back around and raided Ziklag and killed no one. I know you're wondering, how is it, can somebody go on and raid your land and not do the same to you that you've done to it? But sometimes in life you have to understand, my brothers and my sisters, that sometimes things aren't necessarily designed to do to you what you did to it.
Amen. That's a good thing.
They began mourning, they began crying, they began having to deal with what we're talking about today, this grief issue. They have to deal with this issue of the fact that now their loved ones are gone. Now their land has been raided and terrorized. Now things have been shaken up. And how do you deal with life when everything seems to be upside down? Yeah. I've got just a couple of things for you, and then I'm going to go on and conclude this little message. The first thing is that we need to remember who we belong to.
All right.
Oh, my brothers and my sisters, I think somebody just got encouragement right there that was going through a depressive state in their life. Somebody got encouragement right there because they realized that they've been angry at individuals and at things, and they've been expressing it, how angry they are. And now you realize that you know who it is you belong to.
All right now.
Listen here, my brothers and my sisters, after all that David has had to endure, after having to flee for his life, after having found himself in a cave, after having pit everything that they loved, everything that they cared about has been stripped away from them.
My Lord.
And it's even gotten so bad that now his 600 warriors, his 600 soldiers are now angry and they're ready to lash out at David and they're ready to stone him to death.
Jesus.
Oh, but I like this, my brothers and my sisters. I like this right here, because even in the midst of his grief, even in the midst of having been hard pressed, even in the midst of having been weighted down, even in the midst of having to deal with everything that was going on, the Bible says that he encouraged himself. He strengthened himself in the Lord. He realized that I don't have the power to handle it. I don't have the know-how to handle it, but I do have a God that sits high and looks low, and he can help me through it.
Yeah, yeah.
We've got to remember who we
We are.
belong to.
That's right. That's right.
But then, after we remember who we belong to, David reminds us that we have an obligation to remain persistent. Persistency. Let the whole church say remain persistent.
Remain persistent.
Go on and encourage somebody right there in your house and tell them remain persistent.
Remain persistent.
Look at the text, if you don't mind, right there in 1 Samuel chapter 30. Here's what happened after David has had to deal with the tragedy of the loss, after David has had to deal with his 600 soldiers wanting to turn their backs on him. David then begins to have a conversation with the Lord. After he encouraged himself in the Lord, after he reminded himself that the Lord was still his way maker, his miracle worker, his light in the midst of darkness, after David had done all of that, then David said, now Lord, if you say for me to pursue them, then I'll pursue them. Oh, my brothers and my sisters, sometimes we have to be reminded that even when we find ourselves in situations that would cause us to hang our heads down low, even when we find ourselves in situations that will cause us to beat ourselves up, we have to remember to remain persistent.
All right, all right.
We have to remain persistent, because guess what?
What?
You don't know whose eyes are on you.
Well, that's true now. That's true.
Oh, my brothers and my sisters, let me encourage you right here, because for so long you have been one of the ones that have been going around talking about this Jesus man. You've been one of the ones going around praising God like nothing ever before. You've been one of the ones that every time you turn around, you're speaking well of God. You're giving God good pumping up. You're giving God all of the worship and praise. You're giving God everything that God desires and needs. But then when something strikes you, then you want to hang your head down. But don't forget, you've got other eyes watching you, because they saw you when you were up. How do you handle life when your down moments come? Do you begin to waddle around in your down moments, or do you stand up and remain persistent?
Remain persistent.
Bible is full of countless individuals who've had to endure this thing called grief. As a matter of fact, there's one lady that had to experience grief inasmuch as on one Friday she found herself kneeling at the foot of the cross that her son was hung on. She found herself in a position having to watch her son be crucified, having to watch him die a death that no one should have had to die. She found herself at the foot of the cross.
All right now.
Bible doesn't let us know necessarily how she dealt with it after he died that Friday, but all night Friday night he stayed dead. All day Saturday he stayed dead. All night Saturday night he stayed dead. But then she got up Sunday morning to go to the tomb to put spices on his body. And when she got there, she realized that he was no longer there because he had gotten up.
Yeah. Get up.
Remember that even when you're experiencing grief, keep the mindset of, I've got to get out of this.
Yeah.
Fight as hard as you can to get out of it. Get the help that you need
Yeah.
in order to get out of it.
Mm-hmm.
Don't allow yourself to become prey to your grief. Invitation is extended now. I know that we're worshiping virtually and you may be viewing right now and you may say, oh, that's the word that I needed, Pastor McCall. That's what I needed you to tell me today because I was going through some hard pressing times and I didn't know how I was going to make it out. But now I know that I've got to get out of this thing. Look. Don't be afraid. Shoot us a message via our Facebook page or shoot either myself or one of the members a message on Facebook. Let us know that it's because of this. It was because of this viewing that you have decided that you are ready to walk hand in